The Pentagon revised a 2016 draft report to de-emphasize the effects of climate change on military installations, according to the Washington Post. The paper reports the original version mentioned the phrase climate change 23 times, but the final version submitted to Congress referred to climate change only once. The Post obtained the unpublished draft and released its findings in a story published Thursday. Chris Mooney is co-author of that piece. He's an energy and environment reporter for the Washington Post, and he joins me now from Washington. All right, so Chris, a former Pentagon official under the Obama administration said the changes affect the, quote, feeling of urgency in the report. Can you explain how the differences between the draft and the final versions affect the report's overall message?
I think it's really a matter of tone and emphasis. I don't think you would mistake that either report is about climate change and how it affects military bases and what those bases themselves perceive to be the risks that they face. But you just really find in the Obama era this sense that, wow, climate change is this really big thing the military has to deal with, sea level rise most of all. But in the final Trump administration document, you really see something different. They're still putting out the information, but they're kind of more minimizing some of the aspects of it.
And Chris, what are some specific examples of where the language was changed to omit specific references to climate change, such as the decrease in Arctic sea ice?
Yeah, I actually think that's one of the most interesting examples. So both versions of the report talk about Cape Lisburne, which is a radar station on the Alaska coast, Alaska North Slope. And what you have there is a situation where declining Arctic sea ice creates this risk, because without the sea ice as a cover on the ocean, if you have a storm, you can have giant waves kick up and they really just erode the seashore, and that causes damage. Well, it's interesting that in the final version of the report, the language which said we're losing sea ice in the Arctic, that's why the damage is happening, that's gone. And so the final version leaves you with no sense of why this would be happening at all.
And do we know, Chris, exactly who made these changes from the draft version to the final version, and how much should we attribute these changes to the Trump administration's positions when it comes to climate change?
We don't know who made the changes, and it may not have been one individual. We do know that we have a document dated late Obama, and then we have a document in the middle of the Trump administration. And so I think you can make some inferences that the tone of the two reflect the administrations.
Well, the Pentagon report shows hundreds of military sites being affected by severe weather. How is the changing climate affecting these military installations and the functions of the U.S. Armed Forces?
I mean, I think that in many cases they're already feeling it, and that's what the document shows. I think one of the biggest threats is sea level rise. We've reported in another story that in the Pacific Ocean, the atolls, the very low-lying islands formed of coral where the military has a number of different bases and installations. Recent research, which is actually funded by the Pentagon, shows that these places in just decades, by mid-century if things don't go well, could be facing a lack of drinking water as the waves just get a little bit higher, just high enough to be able to spoil the fresh water that the islands rely on. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to abandon the islands entirely, but it means it could be quite expensive in order to find some other way of getting water there or purifying it somehow. So these are potentially big impacts.
Right, and how is the military then currently dealing with the effects of climate change?
Well, I think it's going to vary across the services, but I think you're definitely getting some big level thinking that are happening in some sectors. I think there's a lot of, in the Navy, for instance, the fact that so much Arctic sea ice has been lost, and we can really pretty easily start to imagine a time in which the Arctic is free enough of ice in the summer that it becomes quite simple to take boats of all different kinds across and through there. That's going to change all kinds of strategic calculations. And I think that this is already at the front of some people's minds. And changes to a report aren't actually going to change that.
All right. Chris Mooney from the Washington Post. Chris, thank you very much.
Nice to talk to you.